And knowing my meetings, they'll run my.
Hey, Jay, Jen, Kathy, Sheila.
Hello, Mark. Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, that's a first and first step to all these meetings.
Oh, we love it. No, it's
Yeah,
good.
really good to see you. Have you been out
Like where? You mean out?
anywhere? Yeah, I know I was supposed to talk with you sometime, but I think it was after the beginning of this week. So
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Don't worry. You know, my to-do list just keeps getting longer and longer and longer. It's just, yeah, it's driving me crazy. Haven't been out a lot. No, not in the field. It's kind of cool and rainy here, but you know, the loons are back. It's just every time I think I'm going to get to go do something, somebody emails me like, I need this tomorrow, you know, and it's
Yeah.
just,
Yep.
you drop everything. And,
yesterday,
you
yeah,
know that feeling.
it takes people like you to remind me of a couple of these things, Mark. That's the biggest thing for me.
Well,
It's
but
that bad.
you're in a different place. You know, you have a whole lot of students who are, you know, very dependent on your attention and things,
Oh,
and tends to focus the mind. Yeah.
oh yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it tends to get focused, but I'm glad people chime in when I need to chime in. How's everyone else doing? Kathy, you look great. You staying out of trouble?
Yeah, equally busy. I'm actually right now I'm texting because my son is making sushi. So I have to put a picture of his first attempt of sushi
Oh,
online.
nice. What kind is he making?
I have no idea. I just go with it.
Good
He's good
for
enough
you.
to cook. I'm not going to complain.
No, exactly. Well, yeah, definitely. Hey, Jennifer, it's good to see you here. How you doing? Whoop, she disappeared.
Jennifer has a new job.
Yeah, I was gonna say
She
Jen's
does.
she's had
I
enough of us.
do. Yeah. Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Mark. Yes, I do. I'm here at the Adirondack Watershed Institute, which is based at Paul Smith College.
Yeah, I see those lovely botanicals behind you there on the wall. Those are some nice artwork.
Yeah, they're pretty old. In fact, we've been talking about replacing them with upgraded new botanicals.
That's
But
okay. But no, I love that kind of thing.
they're
Yeah.
a nice backdrop.
Yeah, I wish I had the skill to do that kind of, but I don't. I have no artistic skill at all. But I love it.
The very first woman who I guess she's considered the very first naturalist who took botanicals of insect life cycles. If you
Mhm.
go online, you can find her images for free online. So You can even get older than those because I think those will be probably, those images now are probably about 350, 400 years old.
Do you remember her name?
Marie.
Okay,
I'll have to look it up.
no,
Yeah.
I know I've run across it. It's just not sticking, but yeah. No, it is amazing, you know, how many women over the years have been laboring away in the basements of you know, natural history museums, doing things exactly like that, you know, that took great care and precision and things, and yeah, often not recognized until long after their deaths. Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of Margaret Morse Nice, you know, with the song Sparrow work that she did
Absolutely.
way back.
Yeah.
And there's a nice book that was written about her and
Yeah.
how important that was for observational types of research, but neglected for such a long period of time.
Well, you know, there's a whole bunch of unrecognized naturalists who somebody needs to go write books about. Yeah, Jay, did you ever know Johnny Fisk, Irma Fisk?
No, I knew of them, but did not know them.
Oh, yeah, dear old friend. She sort of mentored Paul Spitzer and me for many years back in a long time ago. But you know, somebody needs to do a biography of Johnny. She was fabulous, and it would be inspirational to get all of that.
Wonderful. I think Kathy even put that on.
Yeah,
That-
check this the shorter one. The big one apparently I just grabbed the Google website link. But it's Maria Sibylla Marian, and she's German. I thought she was French, but she's German.
Mm.
Cool.
So yeah.
I don't know. Am I running this show today, Kathy? I know that
You-
was what I'm supposed to do, but you did all the grunt work getting this thing organized. But,
I'm pretty sure you're listed at the lead, so I'm gonna let you do the talking, Jay.
well, welcome
I
everyone.
will take notes.
Oh, I appreciate that.
I see it's being recorded. That's good. Is there anything else we have to do in terms of housekeeping?
No, well, you know, the first thing we always do is welcome our new participants. And I know Heinrich is someone who has been interested in the working group. And I know he probably hasn't completed the Google form yet. So I actually attached him to our formal invite earlier today. So Heinrich, I apologize for the late invitation, but I'm so glad you got in time to join us. I didn't know if you wanted to introduce yourself to the rest of the group that's here today.
Sure, thanks. So I'm Heinrich Worm. I'm a retired physician living on a little relatively small lake in western Maine. And for the last, we've been here for almost 40 years, initially as a camp, and now it's our full-time abode. And we've been studying our loons for the last 5 years with Lee Addicks as our leader. So we got a little, interestingly, a grant from Stephen King Foundation to get us going. And that helped us, you know, do some banding and some really nice statistics on how our loons are doing, sort of imitating the Loon Preservation Committee folks in their techniques. And it's really put a whole new perspective on our loon population, the way we deal with them, and we understand how things are happening here. So it was very gratifying. You know, as usual, ice wasn't even out yet, and there was a pair of loons right in front of my house. And sure enough, the male had bands on and was the known male from up the lake a little bit. So it was that's really awesome, you know. And in the negative sense too, we lost a few loons last year, and one up was our main productive breeder for the last 5 years, and so it was double sad, but on the other hand, it was also extremely good to know that this bird, you know, we could get some lead levels on him, on some mercury levels, and really understand what's happening in our watershed. And it has created quite an interest in the community, in our lake association. I think we got a lot of donations from people because they saw that we're doing something, you know, seriously about loons. And I think you all know that Maine has a huge loon population, but compared to our neighbor states, New Hampshire and Vermont, we've done very little to really track our loons and to find out how they're doing. So I think this little study we're doing, or this little project, has spawned others to keep going and to start something else too. And luckily, there is some, finances available now. So I think Maine woke up a little bit to do something.
Well, that's been,
And I'm glad to be part of it. So now I'm happy to join you, because I felt I was a little out of place in the other group where also professional rehabbers. And I got in there because we had a major, loon rescue in last January. And so, but I think I'd rather I belong in the community scientist kind of group. So I'm glad to be here.
we're glad to have you, and please don't feel like you're excluded from the rescue and rehab group. We all sort of view ourselves as this big Venn diagram.
Yeah,
where
no,
a lot of
I don't-
overlapping
yeah.
interests. So
Right.
we're so glad. One thing I will recommend, and this is true for not just Heinrich, but any other new participants that have joined us within the last month or 2 or 4, is that we do have a survey that's attached to our agenda item that we usually ask our new participants to complete. It's a little lengthy in that it asks for some perspectives with respect to where you're coming from, maybe a little bit of the history of the group that you're coming from. But what that Google form also does is it populates our mailing list. And so it's a nice way to sort of keep track of all of our members who are interested in getting, regular emails from us. So if you haven't done it already, and I'm not singling out Heinrich or anybody else, that would be great, just so that we can make sure that everybody feels included and wants to be a part of it. Heinrich, you'll see that we have, it depends on the month, but we have people from all 4 corners of the continent, I believe. We've got people from Quebec and the Maritimes that join us at times. We have some people from British Columbia. We have people from down south in Ohio. And we've got some good friends in the Midwest, in Minnesota and Wisconsin. And I guess, do we want to introduce ourselves to Heinrich, or do we just want to sort of raise of hands? How many people are from the Midwest sort of on the call? You can sort of see there are some Minnesotans right there. Am I saying Minnesota correctly? Okay. How many New Englanders do we have? Awesome. And for those at least who are videoing, how many from the Canadian Maritimes? Excellent. And how many from out west in BC? I don't see very many today. We do have some from Alberta and BC that join us sometimes. So at any rate, it's good to see all of you today. I guess the first question I always have at these meetings, is there any update that people want to appraise us with regarding their area? I know there was a big ice out event in Minnesota and Wisconsin area. Does anybody want to chime in a little bit about that and how people are responding in that part of the country?
I'll chime in, and Natasha can too, but I got a couple calls about iced-in loons or fallout loons this past weekend. One was Friday evening. Some people were driving home, and they were going north on 35W, or maybe Mark might know this area, Hinckley. It's a little north of Minneapolis on your way to Duluth, and they saw a loon in a flooded ditch next to the freeway by an exit. I did call WRR, but I don't think they could get it. And then I got another call yesterday morning and photo of a loon that was in a driveway in a Minneapolis suburb, sitting up next to like a back of an SUV. And I was on the phone with the guy, and the loon was wailing, and it was just breaking my heart. And we were trying to, come up with a plan but the guy was on his way to work, and he couldn't, get it, sort of fenced off so it wouldn't get away. And then as we were discussing it, it got up and kind of started, they said, running down the road, and that it got airborne. And they said it was 6 feet into the air. And I did talk to Linda, message with Linda Grenzer, and she thought it probably wouldn't have, flown away, but just probably scooting around someplace, but they couldn't find it. And then I don't know if you guys know Terry Rammer. She's from the Loon Center Volunteer. So she saw my post about it. So she and her husband went down to Brooklyn Park this morning to try to find it. And she ended up being able to talk to like the partner of the guy that found it, and then some other neighbors that were around. And there was one neighbor that said he saw it fly away. I don't know. Maybe it did. We're hoping.
Yeah, could
Um,
be.
so Natasha, do you have more reports?
I should just got off the phone with someone because we hadn't really heard any reports other than one call that someone left us over the weekend. It was up in Gora, Minnesota, which I think is near Ely, where you're at, Sherry. But yeah, the guy had said it was in a field, and when I called him, he said that then what they thought it was a loon, that they just saw it from a distance. But then when they went back to check, it was gone, and they haven't seen anything since. So that one's a mystery too. Not sure what happened. They thought maybe it took off, but they also couldn't 100% say that it was a loon.
I
Yeah,
think,
just for some background, for those of you who are going to be on the next Zoom call with the Rescue Rehab Group, that's a major topic on the agenda for today's discussion, is this whole thing. And we've already put together, the Grenzers put together a folder of photographs, and actually there's a video there too within the Rescue and Rehab Group. And if you don't have access to that folder on Google, let me know, because everybody should have access. If you can give me a screen control for a minute, I'll show you one interesting picture from that crash.
Just a second. I'm working on it. There
Okay.
you go. You should have it
Alright.
now.
All right, so let me just pull this up just because I think you'll enjoy the photo.
Now, I saw a loon a few years ago. It surprised me how far he managed to go before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw this photo on the news.
Can you all see this
Yeah.
one? Yeah, the Grenzers took this.
Poor guy.
poor thing.
Yeah, well, who's more surprised, the loon or the cow?
I'm gonna go with the cows.
Yeah, I just hope that cow doesn't get too close to that beak, that's all, but
We had one that I got a call about on like 7 in the morning, and this guy went in at like 4:30 to feed the herd, and he's walking into the barn and he got attacked. He didn't know what it was, and he put the light on and looked down, and there was this loon all covered with muck.
oh, man,
It was a juvenile one though, in the fall. It's pretty funny.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, is there any document that the Rescue and Rehab Group would be willing to share with the Citizen Science Group with respect on to how to deal with situations like this? Have we developed a protocol like that, or is that maybe an agenda item we can make for the future?
It's interesting that you asked that, because the last time this happened in the Midwest, which was what, 3 years ago, I think, where there was a major fallout about the same time of year. Marge Gibson and Kevin Keno promised they were going to write a paper on the event. And I haven't seen hide nor hair of it since then. Kevin's usually pretty good about writing that stuff up. Marge has other things to do. But Marge will be on the call later today. We can pester her a little bit. I think that several groups, including Natasha's group and Erica's group, posted some advice for the public on what to do if they found some of these down loons, and we distributed that. So some of that may be up there. Natasha, do you want to comment on what the center put out?
We shared information from, or just kind of reiterated the Raptor Education Group's message, and then shared their contact info, Loon Rescue contact info, and then just in case we might have seen anything similar in Minnesota, we shared contact info for some Minnesota place rehab centers, and then I had put together, to the best of my knowledge, where to report a loon in distress on our website. So I also included that there. And so maybe I'll just put out a note, and I'll do this in the other group too, that if anyone sees that and has corrections to the info for their particular state for the areas where loons are going to be at this year, this time of year, definitely let me know so I can
But
update
you
it.
know, Jay, you bring up a good thing, a good point that, you know, now that this has happened a second time in not too many years, and it probably will happen more potentially with climate change, the idea of putting together an organized fact sheet, maybe with some pictures, I think would be a really good idea.
Or,
And
oh, I'm sorry.
for somebody like me, you have to have a bit more details than just call your local rehabber, because for us, it's quite common in the large distances that we have that you're asked to take it to the rehabber that's 6 to 8 hours away. So we
Yeah.
need a little bit of information on there about how to handle it to make sure they're being picked up and put in a box versus, or I guess like plastic kennel will work, but a wire kennel, that just a few bullet points like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
If
I think, well, as with some of the other fact sheets that have been put together, particularly that nice one that Natasha did, you know, a few words with a few key pictures, it would probably be a good thing to do. So I've made a note to bring that up when we have the next meeting group. And Heinrich, this goes back to what Jay was saying earlier about there being overlap between these groups and, you know, need to coordinate what we're all talking about and doing between the community science and the rescue and rehab and all these sorts of things.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think one of the main lessons we've learned is to really publish one telephone number for folks to call and make it and post it everywhere, because people just don't know where to call. And if they call Fish and Wildlife, it's may or may not get anywhere. But if every lake association would try and do that, and also maybe put some good information about transporting a loon, I think that would be really helpful, because
Yeah.
it's so easy to get a transport box together if you're not in a hurry, but it's very difficult to do it when you're under pressure. So
Yeah, no,
I
I
think-
agree. It,
Yeah.
and as Kathy was saying, it depends on where you are. You know, we have something of that issue here in Maine, is in that there are relatively few rehabilitation centers that can take loons, and they're all in the southern half of the state. There's nothing in the northern half of the state.
Yeah.
I will
So-
say our network has really helped.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, like the Grenzers sent me one today that's in Buffalo, which is 7 hours away from me.
Yep.
But, you know, I contacted Karen Sloat and she's connecting with them. And then, you know, we had that call of one in Nevada.
Yes,
I have
Yep.
no idea how they found us, but I was able to talk them through. You know, they put it in their pool and then they caught it and let it go. And it did
yeah,
that.
yeah. And that was a good discussion, because that was, you were involved, I was involved, Becky Dewar in California was involved, all over in Nevada loon. So,
Yep.
yeah,
I guess one thing I was sort of thinking is sort of like our fact sheet. Can we use our network and our shared Google Drive as a place where we can sort of access these things or create hyperlinks to these things, so that it's a great resource for anybody to come and resource, you know, in terms of finding these things relatively quickly. And then even sort of like our fact sheet, it's something that maybe you can amend, that you can include the right resources to contact for your specific location. So it might take a little research on our end to figure out who those rehabilitators are, who know, you know, how to deal with loons, but perhaps something that we can think about for the
Yeah.
future. And I don't
Yeah.
mean to have this, you know, dominate our discussion today. Maybe we should move on to the next agenda item, but I think, you know, in our chat, you know, even John Cooley put in that little comment to Natasha. I think
Yeah.
maybe referring everybody to Natasha's site, the Loon Center, I think would be a great start for us to continue this conversation. And it looks as though
Yeah.
everybody, I think it would be a great idea. And so thanks
well,
for
you know,
getting this thing going.
no, I totally agree, Jay. And I think one of the things that we've already started to do, but maybe it's good to verbalize, is different centers have, it's almost like different centers of excellence. You know, when we're saying to people, you need to look at photos of loon behavior or aging loon chicks or something of that, or loon calls, we always say, go to the LPC site.
Right.
You know, John and Caroline and everybody have put so much good information on the LPC site. And if we could then say, oh, the National Loon Center in Minnesota has this great stuff on loon rescue. So, and just have 2 or 3 places across the continent, you know, they've got the best on this, they've got the best on this. I think the centers of excellence is a good way to go. We don't have to reinvent the wheel for everybody.
Yeah, maybe that's how we do it, is through our Google Drive, at least for all the people that are here, sort of the people that are actually, I don't know what the right word is, leaders, you know, of a lot of citizen science projects that usually will get the calls from their volunteers. And so, you know, knowing where this resource is, maybe this is one way we can get it started, Mark, without creating this delusion of grandeur, big website, you know.
Well, and I think that's one of the goals, is to minimize the work for everybody, because everybody on the call is already busy enough.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's think about that and maybe have as a future agenda item. I think the next, are there any other updates that people wanted to bring up, at least in Roman numeral 2 of our agenda for today? Okay, well, I thought I would move to the items in the core meeting, which is section 3 of the agenda. And the first item, looks like, Mark, you're on the deck to maybe provide an update to everybody regarding highly pathogenic avian influenza nationwide, and what we know regarding loon populations that we can communicate to our networks.
Sure. Well, this is one of those things where there's bad news and there's good news. The good news is loons are still not getting high pathogenic avian influenza to any significant extent. I checked with the Canadian dashboard this morning. There are still no reported cases in any species of loon. I checked with the USDA site this morning. We're still at 9 loons for the United States. The most recent one being in January, and still none in the Northeast. So we haven't increased by any since our last meeting on that. In terms of larger concerns, everybody, I've been talking to people in various state and federal health agencies, the USDA, National Marine Fisheries Service, Environment Canada. Everybody is very scared about this upcoming migratory and breeding season, that we're going to see very much more significant mortalities than even we did last year. In waterfowl, in shorebirds, in cormorants and pelicans and gannets and things in that order of birds, and in birds of prey. When I looked this morning at the USDA site, there are already fairly significant numbers of waterfowl, a lot of snow geese being documented, a lot of Canada geese being documented, a lot of bald eagles as recently as last week being documented dying from avian influenza. So consensus is that this is not going to be a good year. We hope that loons continue to be relatively immune from this whole problem, but we can't relax on this. And I think the concern on the part of a lot of agencies is for people who are working in the field, people who are doing rehab, people who are banding, people who may be monitoring breeding nests or breeding colonies, that we not move the disease around, that we're very careful about personal protective apparatus, disinfection, proper field gear, almost like super COVID kinds of things. The disease continues to mutate. This is not the same disease this year that we saw last year. There are distinct genetic variations. There are many more mammalian species being documented with this, carnivores and scavengers, also a few dolphins, quite a few seals. In some rare species, people are talking about potential for extinction events. One that is under discussion right now is the California condor, where a large number of condors in Utah have died in the last couple of weeks. It hasn't hit the California population yet, but everybody's terrified about that. But there's several other rare species, particularly in Chile and Peru, the west coast of Latin America, where people are talking about potential extinction events in several different species, including one of the penguins. So, Yeah, everybody's very worried about what we see going on a global basis.
Yeah, Mark, fantastic. I guess two things. I think there was just a recent article in Science, or actually two of them in Science within the last week. One was sort of the exactly what you conveyed regarding how bad this year might be. And the second is the question as to whether to immunize, poultry farms or chickens in poultry farms is, a major vector of the disease. And then the second thing, at least for this group, what are some things that we should probably be thinking about with respect to, identifying loons that may be symptomatic of highly pathogenic avian influenza, and what types of precautions should we use for ourselves and or loons that we might handle,
Well, it's a good question. And certainly, with John at LPC and Nina and a bunch of the other field people on here, we've had some of those discussions. Part of the problem is that avian influenza doesn't have unique signs. This is another one of those vague, oh, the bird looks sick kind of, it could be lead poisoning, it could be avian malaria, it could be any one of a number of things where the bird is just found weak on the beach, or in fact, it's found dead. And so I think we have to proceed with an abundance of caution. Even though we haven't had many positive loons, you can't make the assumption. And you don't want to be wrong on this. So I think we have to go in prepared and wearing the PPE and doing the disinfection and handling things extremely carefully. We don't want to spread this to other species. We don't want to get it ourselves and risk, getting a mutation that goes into the human species, which could be way worse than COVID. The public health people are slightly terrified about that.
So is there any PPE that we can get, as citizen scientists that would be relatively, I don't know the right word, accessible? Or are these things that we would
No,
have
I think it's relative. I think it's relatively straight. There's different levels of care. Most of us don't have access to, BL3 or BL4 labs for, the truly dangerous diseases. But I think if you think back to COVID, what were we doing? We were disinfecting a lot. We were wearing masks. We were wearing gloves. I think if you're going to be in the field or handling these animals, you should be wearing boots that can be scrubbed off with disinfectant. Sneakers, Tevas, things like that will not cut it. So I think we're going to be in boots. I think if you're going to be, doing a lot of these sorts of things, you should have a waterproof outside layer, a raincoat, rain gear, or something like that, that again, you can spray off and disinfect. Most disinfectants will kill this pretty well. One of the questions that a lot of the agencies are talking about now is what disinfectants can we use in the field that won't be environmentally dangerous? We don't want to be using bleach or formaldehyde or things like that in field settings. There are enhanced hydrogen peroxides you can use. You can use the alcohols. So I think we don't have to be paranoid and give up our sampling, but I think we need to be cautious for this.
Should we be wearing masks too when we're handling loons, Mark?
Yes.
The transmission too.
Yeah.
So,
and again, will everybody do this? Probably not, but we should be. The advantage of handling loons in the field is that usually you've got pretty good air circulation around you. But this can be transmitted by any body fluid, and loons are known to defecate when you pick them up. Or blood, or saliva or anything else. So we need to be careful. You could wear a mask, you could wear a face shield, something of that nature, but we do want to be careful.
I see Kathy has included the link, I think, to the Science article I was referring to. So
Yeah.
that's great.
The other article that we sent around that several of you may have gotten is in a couple of days ago in the New York Times, David Quammen had a popular article about this, about, why are dead birds falling from the sky? And if any of you would like a copy of that, I can send around a PDF. I think on the New York Times site, I think it's behind a paywall.
Yeah, likewise, I have that too. So if anybody would like a copy of that, I can forward it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe I can even copy and paste it into our shared drive. I think I can do that.
I
too.
think that would be a good thing to do.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'll try to do that. I'll try to organize a little bit there.
And again, one of the things we should make sure between the working groups is that people in one working group have access to the important folders in the other working group.
Yeah, definitely. You know, and I guess that's just getting access, you know, to the names and the email addresses, Mark, which you and I can sit down and try to figure out.
Yeah,
how
that should be easy enough. And certainly there was a meeting last week. I'm losing my time sense, but Doug Tozier had a meeting last week of the research loon working group, and there was discussion in there about avian influenza and what they've got in their folders on Google too.
Wonderful.
If you make a share link of the folder itself,
Yeah,
that should if anybody who uses that link and stars it in their system should get access. You just have to remember to star it.
yeah.
It doesn't give them as good of permissions, like they're not automatically on the editorial list, but maybe that's just as well. Like, does our group need to have editorial list on the other group? That kind of thing.
You know, I think we're all good enough friends that, you know, for anybody who's on the call, if you want access, let us know. We'll give you access. I don't think there's any big secrets.
It's just easy to delete things.
Yeah, there's always that concern. Yeah.
Good. Well, are there any other questions for Mark regarding HPAI for at least the summer? And if there are, I'm sure we can come back to this topic, you know, next month or in June, as we're starting to run into handling birds and some of the questions that you all might have, or some of the people that are working with you might have.
Just a quick question about sandhill cranes. They seem to be really going up in population around here and breeding right next to us here. Have you heard anything about them getting it?
I have not, Heinrich. I would say that on the USGS website and in the Zooms I've had with the federal biologists, they're very worried about whooping cranes. This is another species where they've been talking about this as a potential extinction event. We could lose all the whooping cranes. You know, hopefully it won't happen. There have not been a lot of cranes reported with the disease at this point.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but you get that huge mass, you know, coming through Kearney. It'd just be so interesting to see, you know, the Rocky Mountain flyway populations. That'd be really kind of interesting to see what happens this year.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess we can, if we're okay, if we would like to move to item B, which is working with Jen Denny to help her with her project on the Loon Lake Stewardship Capstone Project. And Jen, I don't know if you're ready to take this one away, but I thought maybe could you just give everybody a brief reintroduction of what's going on and how we could help?
Yes, I fully planned on it, and actually, I'm pretty much done with my project. So this is here's what I did, and here's what might be interesting to you, kind of part of the presentation. So my name's Jennifer Denny, and I'm a master's student at Unity College. I used to work for the Adirondack Center for Loon Conservation, but I recently took a new position as the Stewardship Program Manager for the Adirondack Watershed Institute. But my interest in loons still runs strong. So I'm excited that I was able to cover a little bit of both invasives with this project, which is what I'm working with now, and loons. So I worked with this group to generate the capstone project. Actually, I reached out to this group and asked for recommendations of stewardship programs that fit the criteria of programs that aim to engage lake associations in water conservation. And this group came through. So you're fully in my methods. I was introduced to stewardship professionals in 7 different states, actually, who enthusiastically spoke about their work with me. And the connection to this group is that a lot of these stewardship programs have a citizen science monitoring component in them that often is a great way of showing that the program is being successful. So there's a definite link between those two things. Do I have screen sharing ability?
I think if you ask Kathy nicely.
Okay.
Well, I allowed, yep, see, you got it. I didn't have to do a thing. I like that.
I mostly want to know if I was allowed. So,
Oh, yeah.
Let's see, there's my little bar, and then here we go. So I won't roll you through my whole presentation, but because you probably know a lot more background about this than my classmates did. But I focused my capstone research on engaging lake associations in environmental stewardship to conserve freshwater ecosystems. And a little bit of background is that I'm really passionate about environmental stewardship, and so are a lot of people who coordinate environmental stewardship programs. And we're all grasping at how can we get more people involved. Conveniently for these water-focused programs, lake associations are also very enthusiastic about getting involved in them. And they'll often provide volunteers and additional coordination to help the program be successful. It's mutually beneficial. They might see additional water quality benefits. They might be able to avoid invasive species, help protect loons, and make their lakes more enjoyable resources for them too. So it definitely is a win-win situation to get lake associations involved. And the rationale for stewardship program coordinators to work with them is that they'll have to draw from these groups to get volunteers and coordinate efforts on the grounds. And they additionally need to make engaging programs that are also doable for the lake associations. Nobody wants to do something that's too hard. So people who are like me, previously in my shoes at the Loon Center, want to refine programs to increase the environmental benefits and also focus the efforts on where it counts and what these groups can do. So I actually have two methods for my project. I added this first method later on because my capstone professor wanted me to do something that would focus on the capacity of lake associations to learn a little bit more about what they're capable of doing. And so I used some data that I had from the Adirondack Center for Loon Conservation. I'm sure Nina's ears are perking up here, and studied what the groups had reported to me on what they accomplished. I wanted to know if there was consistency in the number of program activities that they had accomplished and which those activities were that they had done with the highest completion rate. And I quickly found that there was consistency in the number of program activities that they accomplished. In fact, there's 8 activities, and I'll get to what they are in a minute. But the Loon Center had lake associations doing 8 things, and most of the groups, almost 40%, did all 8 of the things that we were asking them to do, which is great. This is over the course of the whole program's lifetime. So some of them did it in a season, some of them did it over the course of 3 seasons. Interestingly, there were none that stopped at 1 or 7, which I thought was really interesting. They were engaged enough if they reached the 6th point, I guess, to make it to 8. And here's what I found that they were doing. I plotted a bar chart here that shows among the 31 lake associations that participated in the program, how many of them accomplished each of the activities. The activities that the Adirondack Center for Loon Conservation is asking lake associations to do include organize a lake cleanup, participate in the lead tackle buyback, give out educational brochures, monitor loon nests, reduce environmental impacts, help protect loon signs, attend trainings, which the Loon Center hosted online, and place and monitor fishing line recycling containers. And interestingly, I found that only 13 of the groups had organized the lake cleanup. So that's something that they were probably only doing if they were going to go through the entire certification process. And only 15 of the groups had done something to encourage their participants to engage with the lead tackle buyback. So both of those were things that I thought that the Loon Center could focus on better supporting them with. And this actually might interestingly relate to others of you who are doing similar stewardship programs where you might be able to identify items that people are struggling with and think about ways to better focus on those items in the trainings. For instance, many of the groups that I worked with generated a guidebook and would focus in on certain aspects that people might need more handholding for. My recommendation for those people at the Loon Center, and don't worry, I'll make sure you get my paper, was that they focus in on these things that are very low in terms of results, which is definitely something I was really interested in going into this. Now, here's where the rest of the groups came in. So as you recall, I reached out to the Loon Diver Citizen Science Working Group and asked you for recommendations of stewardship programs that fit my criteria. And there was about 12 programs that I was able to include. So what I did was try to find out how many, what activities they were doing, what kind of materials the program was providing to participants in order to help them accomplish those activities. And then what kind of volunteer training they were offering to the groups that participate, and also what kind of recognition they're giving to people who successfully participated. So I found this information out by visiting the websites of those 12 groups and mining them for information, and then generalizing it into categories. I also very helpfully was able to talk to people who were either the coordinators of these programs or very involved in the programs themselves. So sometimes I didn't talk to the person who was actually managing it, but somebody who was super passionate, and that was also extremely helpful. And so that helped me to get more information on things that I might have missed, so that I could figure out, like, what do the programs actually look like from a constructive level, like what's built into this. And so these are the 12 programs that I ended up studying. And I quickly found that the stewardship programs that successfully engage lake associations have consistent elements. In fact, 11 of the 12 programs had something embedded in them that requested that participants share information with either their neighbors or tourists, something that involves getting the word out there about the environmental issue they're trying to address. This probably draws on social science that says that you need to share information in order to make a cultural change, which is often what we're aiming for with these stewardship programs. So if you're ever refining your program, it would be a bad thing to drop that component. Then next, of course, since I was talking to the Loon Diver Citizen Science Group's recommendations, I found that 6 of them were either generating plans for Loon Nest platforms and offering them to participants, or giving out the Loon Nest platforms themselves and providing them to people who are participating in the program. And also there was a lot of interest in reducing lead tackle use. 6 of the groups that I was studying were interested in that. And next, there was a lot of emphasis on water quality. So there were 5 programs, and didn't necessarily have to be the same 5 programs for each thing, but it probably shook out that way. That they were all trying to encourage participants to grow riparian buffers, plant native species, reduce water pollution, and manage their stormwater. So those were some of the things that were really driven home by these different stewardship programs. And there's a lot more results. I consolidated a lot of information, most of which is in my paper. So I'll definitely make sure that you have the information you need to follow up with me if you would like to read the whole paper, because I hope that it'll be interesting for this audience. But some of the major impacts that I want to highlight now are that Nina was going to definitely hear more about this, that the Loon Friendly Lake Certification Program, I think you guys can increase certifications by really honing in on the places where people were struggling. So with the lake cleanups and lead fishing tackle parts of that program, it's the steps that I would have taken if I was still in that role, managing that program. And interestingly, something that came up among many of the programs was that they offer choices, which is something that the Loon Friendly Lake program doesn't do, and never occurred to me when I was working with it, was that we have this set of 7 criteria plus trainings that people are asked to do. And sometimes that stuff doesn't relate to their lake specifically. For instance, we have some private lakes that don't allow fishing, and they're like, why would I put up a fishing line recycling container? So offering a core group of items plus some options might be a way to encourage more participation in the overall program, which is something that I saw across the board with the other programs, is that they offer options. And also, this project really reinforced the value of collaboration and increased my appreciation of this group, the Loon Diver Citizen Science Working Group, or Loon Stewardship Group, whatever you guys are now. So we have a lot of similar activities across the board. So that means that there's similar materials and trainings. So there might be opportunities for the stewardship program coordinators to share materials. No need to reinvent the wheel on this stuff. If I had a good presentation on natural history and nesting behavior, it might be something that could be shared with other groups. So there might be ways to make all of us stronger by recognizing the connections. Of course, this study had tons of limitations. The outcomes of the loon-friendly lake data analysis definitely speaks to capacity. It says that the Adirondack Center for Loon Conservation was supporting lake associations really well to get 40% of them to achieve certification. But that strictly applies to Northern New York. It might be affected by the social norms of that group. It could be impacted by the user friendliness of the website. It could even be affected by the amount of time that the stewardship program coordinator has to work with those groups. And I also wanted to mention that if I had reached out to water quality professionals or invasive species professionals, I may have come up with a different subset of programs to study. So there's a definite Loon Diver Citizen Science Working Group bias. And while everybody gave me excellent information and I found a lot on their websites, I may have overlooked some information. So I really apologize if you go through my capstone and you say, hey, Jen didn't notice we did this. It's okay to let me know that information. I really enjoyed all the networking that I got to do as part of the project. I really thought it would be interesting to find out what the Lake Association members want out of these programs, something that they would tell me, but I thought that a formalized survey might be something interesting that could add and further this research. And lastly, I wanted to emphasize that working with lake associations was a really great experience for me. In fact, that's why I'm still in this, still kind of in this field. In fact, it's something that I'll continue to do in my new role. The people want to help and they have a lot of capacity to do so. And also, with our highly similar programs, we're really able to share a lot of ideas and avoid reinventing the wheel. Although I do want to emphasize that we should resist the urge to require a lot from participants. I think that the lake associations can do a lot, but they shouldn't do everything on the list that I generated from my research. We would definitely want to be really judicious about what we ask them to do and how it accomplishes our mission. Because they might find other ways to accomplish their things rather than working with us if we make it too hard. So with that, I have plenty of works cited if anybody is interested in learning more about this. But I would also mention that I'm going to put my email address into the chat. So if anybody wants to follow up with me and read the paper, I'll definitely send you a PDF. In fact, it's still in progress. I'll be done with it this week, but I am definitely excited to share it with you. And if you were somebody who gave me an interview and I already promised that I would give you the paper, don't worry, you don't even have to say anything. I will get it to you. I know who you are. So thank you so much for listening to this update about my project. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of thumbs up.
Thanks, Jen. That was awesome.
Really
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, I
I
know.
hope you
This
get
is
an
the
A+.
first time that you're hearing this, Nina. I figured it
I
was very
know.
relevant.
Yeah, that's okay. I knew you were working on it and it's still in progress. So that's fine.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah. And I figured that paper, I'll make sure you get the paper too.
Yeah, I'm hoping you get an A+ on it. You deserve it. You put a lot
Oh,
of
I
effort
think I
in.
will.
Yeah.
No doubter. Well, and I guess one other thing too, Jen, is I hope you'll stay with us, especially because of all the things that you've learned and the different tools and techniques that you've learned really, I think would help us become a better organization as a whole or a better working group as a whole. So a lot of things that you said that either you've taken from this study or you might learn from, again, going outside of the loon bias. Maybe there are some things that you could really teach us in the future. So I hope you stick around with us and perhaps lend your expertise from your paper to really help us become more successful as an organization. So I guess that's the big thing I want to say besides wow and congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I really, really enjoyed speaking with everybody who was willing to tell me about their stewardship programs. It was absolutely eye-opening to me to see what everybody else is doing. And so I'm happy to stay involved. Right. Well, I can follow up. If anybody has questions, you can message them to me or send me an email. Happy to stay in touch. But I'll let Kathy and Jay continue on with the meeting.
That's rocking. And so everybody can see Jen's new email address on the chat. If not, we can get it to you. And I think we've updated it in our files too, Jen. So you're gonna still get our emails, whether you like it or not. Fantastic, guys. I see the clock is 10 till 5. I know we're scheduled for 5, but I know sometimes we go a little bit later. Before we do move on to our next item, I thought maybe we should ask, it's technically item C, which is final approval of our name and logo changes. And I don't know if this is something that can be done quick and the relative importance of it. I know, Kathy, you were thinking about sending out another Google Forms on voting on our name change, and that will be upcoming, I'm guessing.
Yes, I was waiting for some comments back from the steering committee, but it's all ready to go. And so I'll send that out, asking for people to vote on the logo for the Citizen Science Group and the name change for Citizen Science Group. And I'll just be asking the whole group. Like, there's not enough of us here to really say that. We haven't set a quorum, so I don't know how. Maybe if I don't get enough responses, I'll just bug people several times. Other than that, most people liked the logo. There were some comments on fonts, and I think that depends on the name of the working group. Some of them look better in the fonts and other ones don't. But that's something each individual working group can decide how they want to put the name. And Mark had some comments about whether it should be obviously a stylized common loon. I recognize, and you have a valid point, Mark, but I recognize that the loons that people see are common loons, right? And although I'm the one who's going to, what are these loons that are being found in Minnesota? How many of those are the red-throated loons that can fly off the ground and things like that right now? But I think because people know common loons, I think it's simplified by sticking with it. And there's always that little bit of concern about the indigenous nature, but loons in itself tend to have a lot of long history. So I don't know if you can avoid that nature of it. But I'll send the link out to everybody in the Citizen Science Group. If we get positive votes, the name is changed. And at that point, I will pop the information over to Mark that he can share with the other groups.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Kathy. And it's a lot of work. And also to Erica, I know she had to do some work to get that logo started. I know she's not here today, but big thanks to her and all that who are involved. Okay, I guess we can move on to action item D, or core meeting item D, which is the educational and outreach tool from Nancy and Natasha et al. I don't know if either Nancy or Natasha would like to comment on that, where we are.
I believe we're just waiting for finalizing the name and the logo to put on there, but the content is finalized. It's on the Google Drive under final designs, with just some I guess template ideas for what the border or the heading would look like, I mean. And then once the name and the logo is finalized, it'll be ready to print.
Another Herculean effort, with many thanks to you for getting to that point. It's like Nancy's giving thumbs up. She's in total agreement, which is good. Thank you, Natasha. I guess the next item would be the nesting success decision tree, and I guess that falls on my shoulders. I have not met with the working group or the subset working group, but I think I'm at the point where I'm kind of interested in, I guess, a little history. This is a decision tree to try to begin to get volunteers to perhaps be a little bit more consistent, maybe a little bit more precise in identifying the fate of nesting attempts on lakes, and to try to pinpoint with some level of accuracy the main causes of nest failure among loons, and to characterize those. And to do that, I've been working on a decision tree that's kind of a 15 question sort of dichotomous tree, for lack of a better word or term, to sort of help volunteers narrow it down, if you will, and to what level can we narrow it. To do that, I was sort of hoping that I could get some volunteers that would be willing to, I don't know, have 10 of their volunteers maybe maximum to try out the key to see how it works. And then in addition to that, particularly among some citizen science groups that have the capacity to use Nest cameras to identify, pretty conclusively what might have been the cause for Nest failure, whether it be a video camera or a field camera, trap camera. I would love to see if there would be individuals that would love to have volunteers on their group to sort of do it by using the key and then using those trap cameras and video cameras as sort of more conclusive evidence to see how well what we've decided using that tree matches up with the most likely cause for those Nest failures. And so I'm going to try to send an email out within the next month to see, as people are starting to get loon nests, whether they're willing to give it a try this year. Really, it's nothing really, what's it called, rigid or hardcore, but rather how well does this work? Is there other things to think of with respect to this device? And again, if you do have some of the technologies out there to begin to identify what are the causes of Nest failure and how well they line up with this decision tree, knowing that most of us don't have those technologies, that will allow us to begin to try to validate this tool. And so it's a slow process. I understand that. And I thought, well, this year I can at least send the key out to everybody, or at least the decision tree out to everybody, see what they think, practice it with some reliable field assistants that you're more confident in working with, and see what we come up with. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer those. But again, I think everybody has my email. So if you do have interest in that, I'd like to send it out with a couple of other things to think of, just to sort of get you to give it a try and see how it works. And by the end of the summer, we can talk about it and proceed to next steps as to really looking at it as a tool for our citizen scientists to recognize some of the major threats to loon nesting success, which really does have an impact on loon reproductive success. So as a scientist, I'm really hopefully interested in designing something with a higher degree of reliability and accuracy. Yeah, Mark, I see your hands up.
Well, I just wanted to add something on to what you're saying, Jay. A few of us were on the meeting last week that Doug Tozier had on loon research. And one of the things that Doug is doing with Birds Canada and other groups up there, Mark Mallory and so forth, Doug has a postdoc, Matt First, funded for several years. And one of the things that they're going to try and do, and this is incredibly ambitious but wonderful stuff, is they're going to try and gather all the information that anybody has on loon reproduction, productivity, and survivorship for the entire continent. And so what they're wondering about is what groups have data on your lake, in your state, things of that nature. And so some of the big organizations, LPC and Nina's group in New York and so forth, it's well known what they've got. But if you're representing other groups and you've got data for your area on loon reproduction, success, survivorship, productivity, particularly if it's longitudinal data over a number of years, Doug Tozier and the Canadian folks are really interested in getting at that. So we can put you in touch with Doug. I mean, it's right in Kathy's building. I think it's a tremendously valuable attempt to pull all of our data together and have Matt really look at some of this on a continent-wide basis. It's a terrific opportunity.
Yeah, and we've had discussions, we've talked about how we all measure loon reproductive success and where we differ and where we have similarities. And I think some of the conversations that we've had in the past when we have looked at reproductive success and learning the nuances of how we measure nesting success and fledging success among our loons, they do differ, and whether or not we do measure these things. And I think these types of information that we've gleaned from our group will be very useful for this effort. And so I maybe that's a discussion that we can have too, and perhaps even bring Doug into one of our discussions, because we do have such a wide array of history and wide array of intensity by which we monitor reproductive success. Kathy, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your hand.
No worries. I would just wanted to remind everybody that we did the poll that has all the different variables. And I would think that's what we should start with, is sending them that, because there they can delve into what else they need and who they contact. So the biggest thing we have to keep in mind is anybody who didn't complete the poll, which I think would be anybody who's joined in the last year, they might not be included in that list. And we looked at whether georeferencing was done, wasn't it? And what kind of measures. That's all in that one poll, isn't it, Jay, that we did?
Yeah, it should be, that one sort of registration poll. What it did is, it asked a little bit about the history of your organizations, what types of information you glean from your volunteers. It also asks a little bit about the vestment of your volunteers. And I'm trying to remember, it also queries, what do we all find as some of the more critical and important pieces of information that we would like to gather as a group. And one of those was learning how we can sort of perhaps come together and learn a little bit more about coming up with some commonalities in how we measure productivity and survivorship on loon lakes, both during the breeding season and actually during the non-breeding seasons come up quite a bit now too. Heinrich, you had your hand up.
Just a question about reproductive success. Are we still limiting this to 6 weeks? Or are we going a little bit longer?
I think from what I heard from Doug is whatever you've got.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was one of the discussions we had, Heinrich, is that we all do it a little differently. But some of those questions are in that questionnaire. So you'll see,
Okay. Yeah.
some of those questions come to be. Some of us look at a specific calendar date, within the Julian calendar. So some of us survey, let's just say 3rd week in July, or perhaps the 2nd week in August. So we don't really look at age of the chicks per se, but others do. And so there is a lot of variation, and that led us to having a discussion about, what perhaps is the best measure of productivity. And memory serves me from a past meeting, we said about 6 weeks is probably a common thing that we have all agreed is usually a pretty good indicator of reproductive success, but I'd have to look at the notes from that meeting. It
Okay.
also led to me, leading to a discussion of perhaps maybe we should looking at the developmental stages of the chicks rather than the actual age or a calendar date. And that led to another conversation, but
Yeah.
a while back.
But I think one of the challenges that Matt has is, he's going to build a large scale model of this, and he's going to have to factor all these things into the model. So it's certainly technically beyond anything I understand.
I was just gonna ask a quick thing. And that would be like, if you're looking at Minnesota, and Natasha can jump in on this if she wants, but if you're looking at Minnesota, like there's a local area where I am. So I have 5 years of data on about 20 to 25 lakes. Then you have the Minnesota Loon Monitoring Program, which is once a year that Eric Hansen did. So it's been going on for 40 years.
Right.
And
They
then
do,
you
what,
have
100
the
lakes?
Loon Watch Program, which is run out of Brainerd, that a lot of people are doing all over the state of Minnesota. So it would that kind of include all 3 of those sort of
Yeah.
things?
Doug has exceptionally talented at working with different levels of citizen science detectability data. And he can take these things, and I don't know how his brain does it. I've been working with it for years, but he can take these things and figure out measures of detectability across different techniques, and then use the higher quality techniques as a measure of, as a corrective factor. So once he and the postdoc get going on that, they may come up with some really interesting studies. And so I hope they can pull this off. You're right, Jay, it's a very big project. And I kind of let him do his thing and ignore it. But he has done this with several of our programs, and it's quite a common thing for PERS Canada to do, is to look at what level of detectability, how do you take all these different measures and find out the best data. So I think it may be quite research oriented when they're finally said and done, but it'll all get probably percolated down to a number that says how you detect species with these different techniques for the number of reproductive success, because that's how they do it. And it's quite cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would even say, it might be worth worth inviting Doug and to come and talk to these groups, because these are the people that are sort of spearheading all the different citizen science organizations, and it might be worth dedicating a meeting depending on when they get started to really do that, and maybe we can really have a concerted effort to make sure we've got all as many representatives as we can from across North America.
I agree. Yeah,
I might reach out to Doug to do that, or maybe Kathy, you can just knock on his door and say, hey.
Well, we don't have doors.
There's the cubicles, yeah.
The biggest thing with Doug is he gives so many talks. He's hard to nail down the dates. So we will want to pick, I think, the time of year where we're more likely to have a good number of people. Say, I don't know, September, October, maybe, or
Yeah.
someplace when I'm not here, even I don't have to be here, and invite him for those times. Because if we settle down on a date that's a little simpler for him to maybe fit in 1 or 3 months, we may be able to get him to agree to it. Because I'm inviting him to meetings all the time. It's like, nope, too busy. He says, you do yours half of the work, I do my half of the work. But yeah, he is an engaging person to listen to if you've ever heard him talk.
Yeah, I just put Doug's email in the chat. The other thing I would say is when we're talking about these groups, and I think about Heinrich and the Lake Association on Keyser and things of that nature, think about the people we have on our calls. There are probably dozens, if not hundreds, of other groups, lake associations, that have data that don't even know we exist as a working group. And so I think one of our long-term sort of pieces of homework is how do we get more of these people involved? I ran into a guy the other day on a small lake, Webb Lake, up in north central Maine here. They've got 40 years of loon reproductive data on their lake. They didn't even know anybody was interested in it. So yeah.
And you know what? It might come down to getting someone like the postdoc in combination with a data recovery intern, because there are groups out there that have people you can get that way and just have all the data pulled together. I think the biggest thing is because everybody does things a little bit differently, and they have all these year data. They don't want to, like, you can't take old data and drop it into the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey, no matter how much we want it. Exporting it in would be complicated. So it's you'd be entering every single year, 1 year at a time per lake, unless we have somebody who's really got some good skills there.
Yeah.
I just saw that the time is 5:08. I didn't know if there's any other agenda items that we wanted to talk about before our next meeting besides the date of the next meeting. And so I guess, Kathy's brought up that I think our next date for meeting of this group is scheduled for the last Monday of the month, which is technically Memorial Day, May 28th or 29th. And my guess is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, we might want to move that up a week. That is to make it Monday, May 22nd, rather than Monday, May 29th.
That's a Canadian holiday.
Oh, that's right. That's yeah.
That's when we celebrate the king.
Big question. What do we do? What do we do? Would you like to push it back to Tuesday, or how would people like to deal with that?
Jay, I'm gonna deal with the same thing with the rescue and rehab group, not because it's Memorial Day, but because I'm away that day. And so we have that same thing, and I won't be back until Wednesday. So I'm gonna.
And there's another option. This is high field season for everybody. Should we just say, let's take a pause and come back in June? I'm getting some positives.
I'm tempted to say that.
Yeah, I'm thinking that might be the way to go, unless you need something specific before that, Jay.
No, I think the decision tree is the only thing I thought about that you might need to get out there and start looking at loon nests, but I am totally open to that, and knowing that everybody, it's a crazy time of year. And maybe the first year that we were doing this show, we were doing it every other month during the summer, and that might not have been true, but we can do that too, we can schedule it for, May 29th and then go to July 29th or August 29th if this is a bad time for everyone.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the June date, if we go down to there, would be Monday, the 26th.
Yeah.
Let me just check when Canada Day weekend is. July 4th is always set for you guys. You always hold it
Right.
on the day. We move ours around. Okay, we're good. That day works.
Okay,
So it's June 26th.
Monday, the 26th is the last Monday in June, yeah.
I might have a little issue that day, but let's schedule it for that day and I'll try to work around it as best I can.
Okay. So that's the next meeting. Alrighty.
Anything else? I know some conferences, any updates, for the AOS AU meeting, Kathy, in London, Ontario? I know that's in early August.
It
Talk
is in
about-
early August. You're all welcome to come birding with me.
I'll be
it's
there.
Yes, you better come down to Long Point and go birding. We're about an hour and a half away. Are we sure, like, is the postdoc all settled and is Matt hired? Do you guys know?
My understanding is he was hired. He was on the call the other day. Yeah.
No, that's funny how often I talk to Doug, right? So there will be a loon talk of some sort at that meeting. I don't know if that's a hybrid meeting or not. We're also, if anybody's interested, we're doing a massive communication symposium there about citizen science and bird research. So there will be, I think, 8 Birds Canada talks, including one on me and volunteer management. And I think it's going to be cool. It's nice to have meetings close to home as well. So if anybody comes up, it's a beautiful area, so come and visit.
Oh, and Nancy's off to the citizen. Good luck, Nancy, to your travel to the Citizen Science Conference in Arizona in May. That's fantastic. Let her know if you want her to pass out any of the new brochures. I'm totally on board with that if
There
you'd
you
like.
go.
Yes.
Promote. I also know Waterbirds is second full week in October down in Fort Lauderdale, and that's in association with, tell me, Mark, again, that acronym.
AMBC, Atlantic Marine Bird Collaborative.
Yeah.
That
And,
probably is some of my colleagues out of from Atlantic Canada.
Yeah, Jen Provencher, and yeah.
Yeah.
But we can definitely talk as we get closer to that day, but I'm planning to go to that too, I hope.
So when is the Citizen Science Conference in May? We got to make sure that brochure is done in time then.
Yeah, sorry, my video's not working. I take off, let's see. I think it's the 20, let me look at my calendar. I leave on the 23rd to the 26th of May.
So if we finalize it around before the 20th, you're going to be fine.
Yes.
Sound good?
Yeah. And yeah.
And how's everything coming with Journey North, Nancy, especially with the loon migration this year? We'll have to have a talk from you sometime.
Yes, I would love to have a talk with you. Yes. I am working away. We're at the very final stage of developing our new app. I feel like I keep saying that, but it is. We're getting very close to finishing and doing our new website redesign work. So I might come to you all and ask you if you'd like to test our new app and see if it makes sense.
I feel your pain. We finally have some of our apps working beautifully, but it's been a 3-year process.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
one of my presentations at the Citizen Science Conference about how to undertake this work with much fortitude.
Sounds like a great topic for our June meeting.
There you go.
Hint, hint, hint.
I'll do my
Okay.
poster.
I'd love it. We'd love it. It technically is 5:15, and I think the next working group is meeting at 5:30. So for those of you going to that group, I think I need to give you a restroom break to get a snack. With that, I kind of want to close this meeting with a big thank you to everybody. I hope I didn't talk too much, but I also hope I was able to get most of these agenda items going. And it really is great to see most, if not all of you. I hope it's been a good migration season for you. And I wish you all the best on your loon lakes as things really start happening pretty quickly here. And all of us are available. So if something does come up, feel free to send an email to all of us. via the emails I've sent to you. Anything else? Okay, I think that's it. Take care,
Thank you.
everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
all. Bye-bye.